Hello, here is an update of A Wiser World. I am doing a relaunch of the project, and in this video I will talk a bit about what the new approach is. And I will begin by talking about what the original plan for the project was. Then I will go through what I've done since the first launch. I will discuss the problems that occurred since then and about the things that I have learned along the way. And finally, I will talk about what the new approach is that I'm taking given the things that I have learned. So let's begin. The original plan. Okay, so the idea was, as I presented in the original launch, to have 5 different sub-projects. The first one was what I called Project Zero, and that one concerned the first principles of wisdom. Then there was Project One, which was about the first principles of psychology. Project 2 was about the first principles of mental health. Project 3 was the first principles of philosophy. Project 4 was the first principles of politics. And so the idea then was to go through each sub-project one by one and finding the most fundamental laws and facts of each of these areas, so that it would be possible to find sort of a foundation for the rest of the knowledge within each area to build on. And so that was the plan. Okay, so let's next talk about what I've actually done since the launch of the project. And since I had first presented the first principles of wisdom in some sort of general way, what I put my focus on was the first principles of psychology. So if you've been on the website, you will have seen that there is what appeared first was the summary of the first principles of psychology, or a unified theory of psychology, as I also call it. And what I then did was to go through each area of that unified theory to dig in deeper about the details about it, or sort of the argument behind why this theory must be correct, and so on. And so I released a couple of quite long articles step by step. And I began with discussing the relationship between mind and brain, and about the fundamental entities of psychology. And then after I had published some first articles, I started focusing more on the prediction and learning aspects of the mind, which became quite a big task. And time started to pass by without getting to the point where I felt that I could release sort of a finished article that described in detail about why what the first principles of prediction and learning are, and why we have evidence to claim that they are this way. And during all this time, I had my full-time job taking most of my time. I only had my few evenings and some weekends to work on it. And I realized that having this limited amount of time to spend on A Wiser World, I tried to find areas of overlap between my full-time job and the A Wiser World project. And since I've been working as a strategist for mental health and suicide prevention, I started to look more into the unified framework of mental health, which is Project 2 in the original plan. And so I started to work on that in parallel with the the work on prediction and learning theory. And also on top of that, I happen to just start to delve a bit more into neuroscience. So, why was this a problem? Okay, so let's turn next to the problems that I started to notice. The fact that I was slow to release more and more articles eventually led to the fact that a year had passed since the last article that I published, and I had still not published any new article. And when this is the case, it is really hard to get other people involved in this project, and it's hard to get funding as well, which meant I had to keep working on my own. And since I still had my full-time job to have my income, the end result was practically that I realized that this project would not be completed if I kept on having the same strategy. So this made me realize quite a few things. So what are the things that I have learned? Well, to begin with, the reception I got for the release or launch of this project was there were quite a few comments from people saying that, well, this seems really interesting, but aside from that, I didn't really get that much sort of engagement where people started discussing in detail, like, is that really correct, or could this be a better theory, or have you checked out this article by so and so, which would sort of drive the work onwards. And I realized that the reason for this was to a large extent that the things that I had published so far on the A Wiser World website was actually quite abstract. The things that I talked about were more in sort of the general overview and theories that weren't sort of closely connected to practical situations or phenomena or research and so on. And when something is quite abstract, it's hard for people to see the implications of the theory. And when it's hard to see the implications of a theory, it is also hard to evaluate or verify, which meant that people reading the things that I published couldn't really do much more than sort of shrug and say, yeah, I guess that's interesting, or I guess that's possible that it's correct, and so on. And with this, I also realized that I had to provide scientific references for each claim that I've made. And the reason I didn't do that from the beginning was because I knew that work would be quite cumbersome. Since I've been working on this project for many years, it's hard to remember the references that I've used along the way, and I realized it would take a lot of research to sort of find them again and check, did I really remember correctly, and so on. So my hope was that was something I could add on later. But yeah, I realized that if I really want people to become engaged in this project, I can't just postpone that. I have to include that from the beginning. So these insights took me then to what it is now the new approach that I'm taking. So let's look a bit about what this new approach is. So the idea is to still keep sort of the original plan on the fundamental level of these Project 0, Project 1, Project 2, and so on, where I focus on the first principles of areas like philosophy, psychology, mental health, politics, and so on. But to build sort of a more interesting approach on top of that which has a more natural flow. So what I thought was I would take the audience on roughly the same kind of journey that I have made myself in discovering first principles within these different areas. And what that consists of is beginning with the question, what is a good life? So the question of what a good life is what actually made me make a breakthrough in my ambition to find first principles in psychology and politics and philosophy, and took me on paths that traveled quite far in different directions since then. But the original sort of idea was I tried to answer the question, what is a good life? And so I think it would be useful to then provide a journey where I try to answer that question and then latch on to the things that I have found along the way within psychology and philosophy mainly. And I also think that a lot of people will agree that this is an interesting and also important question, that we all in some way or other want to know what a good life is so we better can achieve that for ourselves. So the plan here now is to create a YouTube series where I step by step try to provide a final definitive answer to that question. And this is also part of the realization that I've made that using a YouTube format will also be probably easier for people to engage in, because people don't generally nowadays sort of go into a website to read long pages if they want to learn something. They prefer watching videos on YouTube or listening to podcasts, and so that is what I'm going to try to do. So you'll be able to follow it on YouTube and as a podcast format as well. And also along the way, instead of sort of waiting until I have a perfect finished article to publish, I will publish drafts in Google Docs where people can follow along on the journey more naturally and engage in unfinished products, which probably I think will make it easier to become engaged in the project. So yeah, that's a new approach, and I welcome you to join me on this journey. I really hope that this will be interesting, and in the next video we will begin with looking at this question, what is a good life? So I hope to see you there, and take care until then.